Right, hello everyone. Welcome to my review of Roadhouse. Now, this is a very strange movie because I felt that there was two different kinds of plots that was trying to work in tandem. I've not watched the original, what do you call this film, and I believe I this is a remake, at least from what I've saw online. So I can't really comment on this based on the original story, and I totally get where people came from in terms of the comments that I received for my review of Three Body Problem, where there is an original story in a book that was sort of, I believe, I guess turned woke a little bit in their form of representation and DEI and all these kinds of bullshit in the TV series. And I only now know that because of some people who are very, very much willing to fill me in on what the book was originally about. And I'm really happy to those people who have actually read the original book because trust me, I'm a fan of things like the comic books and books like Harry Potter, a lot of Ian Colfer books, a lot of Tom Clancy's books, and trust me, I know how it feels very much out of touch when the live action version is so far sometimes in terms of the core story and representation of what the original author intended, and especially race swapping and DEI bullshit and all these woke crap. I really feel that it doesn't belong in storytelling. And so when you try to take a pre-existing story and turn it into a film, I really feel that the showrunners of whichever kind of story shouldn't really try to put in their own political agenda into a pre-existing story, be it sci-fi, be it history, whatever the case, right? It doesn't really matter. But yeah, so I'm actually kind of happy that people came out on my review of Three Body Problem to talk to me about the previous, like pre-existing context. But again, this is kind of the opinion of people who are watching these kinds of shows for the first time without pre-context. So I know because I've been on both sides. I've had context for some things, especially comic book stuff, and no context for a lot of other things. And this is one of those stories where I can only talk based off what I've watched, which is this film, Roadhouse. And here's the thing, right? The story starts off feeling like a very grounded show about some kind of a MMA fighter who has sort of left the ring and is just making petty cash in random places, trying to pick up fights wherever he goes. Though I feel that some things this character does is just really odd because so you show up in a ring full of people to intimidate random people, and I don't know, hoping you would find a match that actually pushes you and challenges you once again because you deep down you're still a fighter, and then you're willing to get shanked randomly on the street by the same guy you just picked a fight with. It's so awkward. So now let me go through the series. This is very much a character-driven story, which is the story of Elwood Dalton, who is played by Jake Gyllenhaal, who on his own is a great actor. I honestly like Jake Gyllenhaal, and in any movie that he's in, he truly is able to be center stage and steal the show, provide gravitas to his role and whatnot. However, I felt that this story just was so out of touch in terms of what it really would feel like to get behind the emotions of a UFC fighter or whatever that may be, and didn't really make me feel very much, in like the same boat as him. Like the reason because is it has a very randomly placed short clips of like his past, trying to connect us to a story where Albert Dalton apparently killed his good friend and brother of some sort in a UFC fight because he got carried away during the fight, and that has been haunting him, and he's been just like having a death wish basically. So the story starts off with him just picking a fight at a random fight club sort of thing, like late at night, just like I guess some kind of private club fight. And he just shows up. And then the person who is already able to beat a bunch of guys says, "No, I ain't fighting this guy because this guy's a professional." And everyone seems to know him because obviously since he's famous, he's a UFC fighter, everyone will know him. So that guy chooses not to fight him, and Elwood Dalton just gets paid for fee. So as he walks out of the club, the other guy who didn't want to fight him suddenly walks up to him and stabs him with a knife. Now here's the thing, right? You initially showed as though this guy was afraid of him because he knows who Elwood Dalton really is. But all of a sudden, he's willing to show up on the street with a knife and just stab him at the back of the club. Like, for the fact that this guy is so famous, there would definitely be people generally in the street who would not just know that Elwood Dalton is heading out of the club, but would definitely expect, something to break out. And also, it's so dangerous for, a person who knows that, like, for example, let me give you a simple example. Let's say I am a featherweight, right? Which I actually am. So let's say I'm the featherweight category, which is the same category as I think Conor McGregor. So I'm a, like, let's say a good fighter in my local town, but Conor McGregor shows up in the ring. I definitely know that I ain't going to be fighting Conor McGregor because I don't have a death wish, right? But I'm not going to show up in the back alley and try to shank Conor McGregor with a pocket knife. It's ridiculous. Like, that guy would know that something's up. And even if he has a death wish, his fighting instincts would kick in, and all he has to do is just kick you in the torso, and that would disable you. Like, these kinds of people have insane reaction speeds because of how much training they've gone through their entire lives. So it's so awkward to see Dalton just suddenly get stabbed and be fine with it, and he's just patching up his own wound. And then he drives to like a train track and waits for a train to run over the car. And that's the only scene that really represents that he has a death wish. I think that scene had a bit more meaning to it because he really does test God sometimes, where he sees whether actually tests his car's ignition, which is pretty much what he was doing, is seeing whether the car starts in time before he could leave the tracks because his fear kicks back in. So it's a guy trading the fine line between, the instincts to live and also a death wish which he mentally has because he's broken down after killing a good friend of his, um, or his half brother or whatever he may be. So there's no real backstory to the full context. It's just very short clips that are peppered throughout the film that sort of try to showcase to you what really happened. Though it would be nice if we at least had like a 5 minute clip of him fighting the original UFC fight because UFC fights are pretty awesome. Like, that would have been very nice to show the fight choreography of this story. Or this film that's being, I'm sure the what do you call this? Jake Gyllenhaal worked really hard for this role, and it's really sad to see that he's only allowed to fight like street mobs and not really an actual UFC fight, which is what he's been training for. Now, all of this realism and groundedness gets thrown away literally halfway through the film with Conor McGregor's ass showing up. And if I had one word to summarize this story, it's ass. Now, here's the thing. Albert Dalton gets called by this woman. I forgot her name. Let me just scroll down to find out what her name is. Frankie, right? And Frankie runs a sort of a local pub in her town, which is called Glass Key. And because the pub is called Roadhouse and it's located somewhere towards like the riverbank, and because it's blocking an important part of land that Ben Brandt, one of the local sort of capitalist, industrial entrepreneur, whatever, he wants a piece of land there because he feels that he controls a very important part of the river, which will allow them to continue their smuggling business. He wants to just force out the people who are running the roadhouse. Now, in its essence, this is a fine story, but we're not given enough context as to what Ben Brandt's plans actually are. Like, there's no real investigation going on or being done by anyone in the local team to even talk to us about the story of Ben Brandt. Like, we don't know what his motivations are other than, oh, he wants the roadhouse because it's an important piece of land so they can continue the smuggling. Like, okay, but you've been doing it already. He's already been able to smuggle these things. It's not a significant difference if he suddenly gets just that roadhouse. Like, why is it such a significant thing? I think is something they should be able to explain in the story. Because as far as the story is concerned, he has full control over the local sheriff, which means he has control over the entire town already. So there's no reason for us to believe that one roadhouse is going to be stopping him from continuing his smuggling business and whatnot. Right? Because you already control the police of the town. I mean, what more form of control do you want? The sheriff literally at one point arrests Dalton for just hanging out with his daughter Ellie, who he meets awkwardly at an emergency department. So Dalton's hired by Frankie to sort of be a bouncer at her roadhouse because Ben Brandt has been sending people to just sort of be annoying and irritating and start bar fights, which would be normal in an Irish pub, pun intended, but it's just not something Frankie can handle, and it's really been messing up business, which doesn't seem like the case because the pub is always full of people who are always willing to come and just be there even despite all the fights happening. So we don't get to see how it's been affecting business because the pub is always so full. But I don't know if subtly people have been increasing in the pub without me realizing in the film, but from the time I watched it, I couldn't really tell that people were increasing because Frankie never really brings it up, and no one actually visually shows it that people in the club has been increasing, and probably, I don't know whether it was shown. Maybe I was passive in watching it, but I felt that I didn't really observe that. So it didn't really seem like the situation is getting any better. But Dalton does show up and he does control a bunch of the fights from taking place. He shakes off a bunch of people who show up, especially a local biker gang. There's always one local biker gang, right, guys? Because there's nothing. I mean, it's one of those classic plots, and since this is like a remake, I'm only assuming that it was there in the original, so they're just having it here. But anyway, local biker gang, which in real life, by the way, can be super nice people because they're just bike enthusiasts. But in this case, they are a bunch of thugs who are just being hired by Ben Brandt to come and rough up the club. And here's the thing: they are actually a bunch of clowns, like the people who act as these what do you call this so-called thugs. Um, are just really awkward people. Like they don't really are believable thugs. Maybe one guy, like the leader of the group, seemed okay. Like this guy JD Parodel, like he seemed to be okay on his own. But having someone like Mo just hang out in the group is just so awkward because he clearly doesn't look like someone intimidating at all. And even if he's just one of those guys, like there's always this gangster group where you have one guy who just is socially awkward and he's just a nice friend and he just wants to be there because it's cool. So Mo is sort of the representation of that. Though I felt that the scenes he was in was kind of off-putting because he's not at the least doing even what the group is supposed to be doing, and he's just there for comedic relief. It's just weird because you kind of feel like this could get serious because you're hiring a very, very serious fighter to handle the local thugs, but it seems like any bouncer would have done the job. But Frankie insists that it has to be Dalton, a world champion sort of UFC fighter, or rather just a very high professional level fighter, which it's kind of overkill for a local club. But he gets and she also pays him very good money, like close to 10,000 or something like that, which is pretty insane amount of money to hire someone just to handle some local biker gang thugs, right? And even then, it's all pretty much a fist fight, which is also strange because, as far as I understand, in America, a lot of the clubs actually, the owners especially, can keep guns, firearms, and they can actually threaten people to get off their club and out of their property if they are known to be causing trouble. So the only thing I can believe is that Frankie is afraid of their own local sheriff, and there's sort of political pressure from the sheriff himself, which is why she doesn't really want to get firearms involved, and so she's just hiring bouncers to do what bouncers do. So there's a bit of, I don't know how exactly American system works. I'm not from America, but I sort of understand that people have the right to bear arms and keep people off their property if they're causing trouble. And if you could, because especially nowadays you have social media, and this film is peppered with people who just have high tech stuff like mobile phones and whatnot. So you can just record the whole situation that takes place and literally shoot them if you have to, because I think it's fair to say that, these people are causing serious trouble, and they're continuously coming over, which means you can just send the footage over to the rest of the police departments that actually work. So it's kind of weird because I understand that this plot may work in like 70s or 80s, but today it's just very difficult to see this kind of thing come together. But I guess they tried their best. So Dalton beats up the biker gang the first time, and he warns them, and then he beats them up. And there's some decent choreography in the initial fight scenes for this. And then he meets Ellie at the emergency department, where he drives the biker gang in a car to the emergency department, which is okay. Here's the thing. It's nice comedic relief, but it's really scary to have the people who have been causing trouble to a local bar for a really long time, and you are the one guy who's shown up to sort of stop them. If they wanted, they can just choke you while driving the car, and that's really scary too. But Dalton is just so cool, and all of these thugs, who are absolutely not intimidating at all, are also fine with him just driving them to the ED, where he meets Ellie, one of the doctors working the AD, and she patches him up. I think she's like just an ammo there, and she patches him up, and that's how she gets to know him. She knows he's clearly out of town, and then I guess she figures out who he is. And then there's a scene where they introduce Ben Brandt, who is the sort of the person running the local drug business and whatnot. And he is on a boat, and his introduction is basically someone shaving him on a boat on rocky waters. And then he asks the captain something like, are the waters going to be shaky? And the person who's trying to shave him, gets him cut. But Ben Brandt walks up to the captain and punches him, and the scene just cuts. is one of the worst introductions I've ever seen to any villain. Like I don't think I've seen a worse introduction than that. Like a villain actually being on a rocky boat on like high seas and telling the captain like, "Hey, is the seas rocky? Am I gonna get cut from shaving?" Like how like what's your point? Like are you just gonna trust the captain's word straight off the bat, even though it's obvious that it's rocky, just so that you get the opportunity to punch the captain? Or are you just an idiot, right? So this film treads the fine line in this sort of logic throughout. And that's the weird thing about it. It's just so off-putting when you have these kinds of really weirdly written characters. And as I said, literally halfway through the film, Conor McGregor's ass comes in and summarizes the entire story. Because once he comes in, I don't know, for some reason, he's walking like this weird robot, and he's just grinning all the time. And it would be fine if they give him a bit of backstory too, like someone introduces him, because he may not have his own introduction, so maybe someone else can introduce him and give us a bit more context as to who he used to be, why he's walking buck ass naked in the middle of this city, and we get it, he's a gun for hire, he just shows up and beats people up. That's fine. But who is Nox? Why is Nox, right? There's no real explanation, and he just seems like a force of nature who just shows up, who's hired by the father of Ben Brandt, who is mostly in the shadows. And that guy apparently is operating from prison. He has his spies. He wants to help Ben Brandt, get rid of this roadhouse once and for all. So he hires Nox. Nox shows up, and and Ben Brandt says, you know what? Let me just try to do this my way one last time, which obviously not going to work, and it doesn't work. And then Nox picks a fight with Dalton in the roadhouse, and Nox shows up. He's just like trashing up the place, and randomly one guy yells "bar fight," and everyone starts fighting like it's fifth grade, and it's so weird. Like, who does that? Who just stands up in a bar and goes, sees one guy picking a fight and goes "bar fight," and then just starts punching the guy next to him? This isn't a time where people are still barbarians. It's so weird when this kind of shit happens, and takes you just completely out of it. It would make more sense if these people were hired by Nox himself to actually cause a ruckus, or Nox worked with Ben Brand to just get some local thugs to sort of show up and do this. But a lot of the people, the guy who especially yells bar fight and actually starts the fight, is not even a thug. He's just an actual like person who attended the bar. Um, and then again, like, where are his friends? Like, where's his group? Like, they don't even show the dynamics of the people actually sitting in the bar to make us believe that these people are living beings. And it more just feels like a bunch of NPCs just crowding the background and they're just gonna be involved in whatever that's happening. So they're just sort of reacting to the sort of this, like, I don't know, like special effect that takes place in the area, and then all the NPCs just like, whoa, okay, then we gotta fight each other. It's just so weird. It's not realistic and not natural. And yeah, it's at that moment where Conor McGregor takes over the second half of the film, um, that the realism and groundedness gets completely shut out the window, and this thing turns into like the Fast and Furious. I'm talking about the new franchise, when The Rock showed up, not the original one, where everything is just so, like, on a scale of 10, it's like 9 or 10 out of 10 in terms of its insanity and just out of this world stuff, and it becomes like some kind of crazy, like Bollywood fight scene. Um, and there are some moments where you can see them actually using like good stance and moves and posing and positioning and dodging and ducking and all these kinds of cool things, elbow strikes, and it's nice to see when they're actually fighting like fighters, which is what they are, right? The whole point of you wanting to make this guy a UFC fighter and not a WWE fighter is because you want to show some kind of realness and groundedness to the fights. But it gets further and further unrealistic, and there's also some weird, awkward CGI moments. There's one CGI moment where there's like a truck trying to run down Dalton, and all of a sudden speeds up in the CGI scene, and then there's like a boat that's falling. I think it's like a hanging ornament in the roadhouse that just falls down, and there's also like an awkward CGI moment, and they turn the frames per second really high, all of a sorry, like really low or something, and then make it like a little janky, and then it switches, the speed goes up and the FPS goes down, and then it looks really weird and awkward in some scenes. Um, the editing is just weird. Like, here's the thing. I think the best person who could have done these kinds of shots, or rather achieved these kinds of shots, would probably be someone like Guy Ritchie. I can feel Guy Ritchie's sort of touch would have actually made something like this feel a lot better in terms of its pacing, snappy editing, a quick storyline, witty dialogues, and good action scenes, right? But whatever this director was trying to do, just didn't achieve the right tone and pacing. And as I said, you have like one robot like Conor McGregor, and the rest of the characters just being all over the place. Like we don't even know what each characters actually are trying to do. The only one who actually had a decent backstory in this entire film, besides Dalton, was this girl. Her name is Charlie for whatever reason, and her dad, who were running like a local bookstore. And they've been, Charlie actually writes blogs and whatever about Glass Key, and she sort of narrates the story almost from like a fourth wall perspective, where she tells Dalton and us, the viewers, where at first it sounds like some kind of a western where this guy shows up and cleans up town, but then it sounds like a mystery instead. But it's not a mystery. There's nothing to be solved. Dalton doesn't really do any real investigation. He seems to have no friends, no contacts to help. Frankie is useless too. She just always shows up to Dalton and be like, clean yourself up, go back to the club and fight again. I am already paying you. Clean yourself up, go and fight. I'm paying you. Like these are the purposes of these characters. There's no real human reason behind them. And Ellie just likes Dalton because she likes Dalton. There's no actual scene of showing where Dalton saves Ellie because I think modern Hollywood doesn't want to show the woman getting saved or anything like that anymore. So there's no real scene where Dalton helps or saves Ellie to the point where she's able to immediately fall in love. Like you see, when you have moments of very high emotions like death, it more than often will make you feel like you owe your life to the person who saves your life. And to a man and woman, that can sometimes come down to literal love and wanting to live with that person for the rest of your life because you feel like you want to make it up to them for the rest of your life. And that's kind of the idea behind the original concepts of heroism, which is why when the damsel gets saved, they often want to fall in love with each other because she feels like she owes her life to the guy, and the guy's been like, okay, since you love me this much, and if you can prove it to me, we might as well just stick together for the rest of our lives because why not, right? But nowadays, you don't have these kinds of plots. So you see Ellie actually saving Dalton from her father at some point. But that's all after Ellie takes him out on a random date for no reason whatsoever, other than the fact that they met at a hospital where she patches him up. He beat a bunch of local thugs. She doesn't even like thank him for that to tell him like, hey, you know what? Actually, these guys have been causing trouble for a while, and you've actually been changing things, and I'm really happy about it. I also heard from like Charlie, who's a good friend of mine, that you've been a great guy and you've been helping out clean things, investigating and all of these stuff. I can help you through it, and then maybe they sit down on the investigation together, and she says, I'm actually against my dad, and I have information because he's my dad, so I know there's stuff in my house that could help you with your investigation. Let me help you. And they get closer, sitting together and working on this investigation over nights, where he goes at night to beat people up, and she's actually helping, using him to get the materials she needs to help prepare more investigative stuff to take down this ring. It could have been one of those simple, complex stories where you have the duality of a fighter and a person working at the local hospital, who's been living in this town, who's been wanting to clean up her town for the rest of her life. And when she finally gets the person who has the strength to do it, she uses that person to work together to clean up town. And they probably have help from people like Charlie, who's been writing about town, people like Frankie, who knows people who can find people who've been working in the club, who's been living in the area to get more information. It could have been a fantastic story at its core, but none of this was brought in, and it just turned into this insane, like, as I said, Fast and Furious fight. And there's even one point where the sheriff shows up at Dalton's doorstep, and he's like, "Oh, they kidnapped my daughter Ellie. I need you to return the drug money," because Dalton finds some money somewhere, and he beats up a bunch of local cops, and he's just like, "Oh, I need you to return the money." And Dalton's like, "Oh, okay, so they took your daughter. Oh, you want the money back? Okay, let me follow you to this boat, which is literally run by Ben Brandt. There's no guarantee of Ellie returning." And Dalton like could get shot at any time. He could get gassed. He could get stunned with a stun gun. They could tie him up to the chair and literally rape him if they wanted to. But the realism of the character who literally lives his life in a UFC fighting ring, where you know what real fights are like, you know what things can escalate to, you know how there is a lot of drama and danger surrounding people who are even attending these kinds of fights because it's a huge thing, and also it makes a lot of money. And when you usually deal with people who run fights or are involved in a lot of fights, you often do end up getting very much exposed to local mafia and just people who use fighting as a way to get around the world. So it's so weird that Dalton doesn't quite even get it through his thick skull that these people could do anything they want to him on the boat, and he relies on some kind of a bomb to go off at the right time. And for some reason, that doesn't just bring the boat down instantly. This it was a massive explosion that literally sent people flying. It would have just brought down the boat. Like such a big explosion is so strange. But let's just say the boat was expensive enough to take the hit, fine, whatever, and then they take the boat ride to some kind of a Hangover 2 or 3 scene, whichever, the one where the boat go crashes into the roadhouse, and then Ben Brent flies from the boat to the top of the roadhouse and somehow survives the entire trip. Um, and then Knox fights Dalton in the roadhouse, and they trash the place up like I don't know, some Hulk versus Red Hulk fight or something like that. And then yeah, it comes into a weird ending, which no one really cares about anymore because at that point it just becomes like I don't know, some comic book fight. So here's the thing. As I said, I really like Jake Gyllenhaal, and I think that there was a decent premise where they could have taken this to a really good story, but something very weird was going on, and I feel like these are the kind of reasons which makes you really want to watch the original stuff and read the original materials because you know that no one writes something as stupid as this. Um, so I'm going to rate Roadhouse a 2 out of 10. And here's the reason, right? See, out of a scale of 10, I can't rate films of 5 and above because I feel that when you reach 5 territory, you're talking about films that you want to rewatch because they're so good, And I come from the early 2000s where there was a lot of movies where, like, I mean, I'm a 90s kid, right? But I used to watch a lot of movies in the early 2000s where it's like, you really want to rewatch those movies again and again because they're so good. Like, I watched Terminator 2, like, I don't know, like close to 100 times, right? I watched Terminator 1 almost close to 100 times. I used to watch Lord of the Rings. I used to watch Star Wars. I used to watch a lot of these action films, like what was it back then? All the James Bond films, I guess. Indiana Jones, the good ones. Um, you know, even some of those. So one with Bruce Willis. I mean, a bunch of Bruce Willis films, right? There's so many good movies. Jackie Chan movies, man. Oh my God, Jackie Chan's fight scenes and choreography was absolutely beautiful, insane. Bruce Lee films. These are the kind of things that become timeless classics. And just the fact that you want to rewatch a film because it's so good is where it reaches a 5 for me. And Roadhouse is something that I don't ever want to watch again because I don't care about it. It just didn't make me feel like it's even a movie enough. And it's so sad because he's featuring a brilliant Hollywood actor of our time, which is Jake Gyllenhaal, who I think has a lot of potential moving forward. Like even his past films are just so much better. Like, look, let me just click him. So this is showcase to you what kind of a portfolio this dude has, right? Nightcrawler was an amazing film, Donnie Darko, which I watched once, by the way, but I really want to rewatch it, which is why it's in my watch list again. It's a really good film. I watched this back in like 2002 or 3 or something. And I don't fully remember it, which is why I want to rewatch it. But it's one of those films which makes you feel like it's so good that you really want to watch it again. Ambulance was horrible compared to whatever he has done before. Nightcrawler was so much better. Donnie Darko was pretty good. Um, he was in Spider-Man, and you can see how influential he was in the Far From Home story as Mysterio because he's just good at what he does. I found Life was a pretty good sci-fi film. Wait, he actually did Everest? I don't remember that he was in Everest actually. But Southpaw was actually good. Actually, I didn't rate Southpaw, I think. But Southpaw was pretty good. I actually watched Southpaw. That's pretty nice. Um, Prisoners was okay. Source Code was really fun. I enjoyed Source Code. It's a 6 for me. It's not one of the better sci-fis out there because I watch a lot of sci-fi films. I feel like even things like Steins Gate is straight up better than Source Code. So, it just loses out because there's just better films out there. What else? Brokeback Mountain. One not is this okay? Here's the truth. I watched Brokeback Mountain. Not that I really like it, but I watched it because I was really curious because it is Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal, and it is what it is. Okay, I can't really comment too much. Yeah, yeah. You know what? He's wasting potential in films like this. It's just not fair for him. I really feel like he really should be given a better chance. But yeah, and Conor McGregor. Here's the thing. Conor McGregor seems like great potential wasted because he's an actual professional UFC champion, right? He's, I think, the featherweight champion, and there's one more like below featherweight. I think it's above bantamweight. I can't remember what the term is. It lightweight featherweight or featherweight lightweight, something like that. But um, he's an actual trainer. Like he can actually train Jake Gyllenhaal even to actually make the fights look realistic, and he can even do his own coordination because that dude is an actual world champion, right? You have so much potential having a world champion fighter in your film, and you absolutely waste it. You know, you can make those scenes so much better. You can make Jake actually train his fellow like sort of bouncers to help him fend off people who are coming to the club. But you don't even get those scenes. He goes up to a guy, recruits him, seeing that his knuckles are bruised, asking him like, do you hit the gym often? And the other guy's like, yeah, I box every now and then. I used to box back in college. And then Jake just calls him over, and immediately he's in the club like hustling people. But you don't actually see him, getting trained by Dalton, who obviously as a pro can give you better tips than just like that guy has a knife under his pocket. You gotta just take one big step back and punch him in the face. It's not so simple. There's a lot of things to train, like reaction time, and the person who also wants to jab you is also going to expect these kinds of things. They're not just going to fall for a step back and a punch in the face, right? Because these people who are holding the knife also have a lot of adrenaline pumping in their veins. They know that they're going to stab you. It's potentially going to risk the person's life with their stabbing as well. If they already come to the point where they're crossing the line where they're going to stab someone, they probably will have a slight chance of being a killer, and they know that. So yeah, this is really strange, off-putting things. So it is what it is. I don't ever want to watch these kinds of shit again, honestly, but there's not really much choice, is there, right? Everything is just woke and DEI garbage at this point that I really feel that, I really am enjoying watching some of these classics. And hey, if you really do want to check them out, I do have a bunch of lists on my channel, which actually, give you a chance to check out some good old stuff. Let me give you a tip. So you guys can check out my videos of 10 underrated films to rewatch, where I have great ones like Escape to Witch Mountain, The Fox and the Hound, Batman Robin, Reign of Fire, Treasure Planet, Series of Unfortunate Events, Space Adventure, Jumper, Terminator Salvation, It Follows, and there are some honorable mentions. There's also my IMDb Top 100 list for you guys to have a glance at what my top 100 films are. I also have another one that's my top 20 films from 2000, 2020, which I think is highly recommended because anything after 2020, I think just went to shit. It's like COVID hit and everyone just lost their brain cells together with, unfortunately, some of their lives, touch wood. But yeah, it's really just unfortunate to be in a time where we don't get the kind of films that we used to get. Like Revenge of the Sith is so much more underrated than whatever it originally was, compared to things now. Casino Royale was great, Slumdog Millionaire, Wall-E, Watchmen, Man of Steel, Wolf of Wall Street, Shape of Water. Like some of these films are just great. Ready Player One, Infinity War. So yeah, I highly recommend we take a step back and just watch, like really good stuff and stop watching trash, like whatever that's just coming out. But I am doing this because I want to review films for you guys, and I do want to keep in touch with whatever is actually happening in today's world. So pop culture has been my channel to all of these stuff, and I'm also really happy to those people who did come onto my review of what do you call this? Three body problem, and point out to me mistakes and things that I can improve on, as well as what the original story encompassed and what the intention of the original author was, and how things have changed sort of in the live action version, which is really sad because I don't understand why you want to race swap in a film when you actually have more actors in Asia than in I don't know, in Hollywood even. Like we literally have more population than the rest of the world in China and India and Southeast Asia, and it's just so out of place to want to race swap them even, just for the sake of DEI and whatever crap. And it also doesn't really jive well with the dynamics of the characters, because it's one of those things that you can't really get by mixing races. Is you don't really get enough, like backstory, cultural backstory within a specific race itself to even understand. And here's a good example. Let me pull up one for you. So here's one that says, as I possess a mind developed in the East, Wang Miao is not inconsequential. He is a national hero, an honorable family man, dedicated to his family, his country, and science. Of course, the Western mind can feel is inconsequential. This makes sense since in the West, I guess he meant to say a porn star, will be paid much more and receive much more appreciation. And he goes on to give an interesting point, which is the naming of one of the characters. So I believe in the book there is actually a character based on what the comments are called Lo Ji, and this guy is explaining that Lo Ji actually means logic in the original language. So it's very interesting, and I think it's something we can learn from how, as outsiders or as people who are not speaking the original language, we wouldn't get these kinds of nuances, right? And trust me, I can understand that because it's a cultural thing. Like I know three different languages, so from every different language, there is certain terms and cultural representation that you wouldn't really know when you're outside of it. And when you cut that off from the final version of your story, you sort of take the author's heart that has originally existed there, which in its own is a form of cultural representation. And it's like butterbeers in Harry Potter, right? Or Irish bar fights. It's one of those things that you only get with and understand because it's been there for so long. It survived a lot of things. But yeah, I think that's a good way to wrap this up. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, guys.